The winter of 2018 arrived in Burlington, Vermont, with the kind of cold that seeped through every layer of clothing and settled deep in the bones. Snow fell in thick, relentless sheets, blanketing the streets in white silence. It was the type of season that made people retreat into their homes, seeking warmth and the comfort of routine. But for Officer Sarah Mitchell, routine had become a suffocating cage. Sarah had been with the Burlington Police Department for 7 years. At 34, she was respected, dedicated, and known for her unwavering commitment to justice. Her colleagues admired her ability to remain calm under pressure, to see through the chaos of domestic disputes and late-night disturbances with clarity and compassion. She had sandy blonde hair that she always wore pulled back in a tight bun, sharp green eyes that missed nothing, and a presence that commanded respect without her needing to raise her voice. But beneath that professional exterior, Sarah was drowning. Her marriage to Derek Mitchell had been crumbling for 3 years. What started as passionate love had deteriorated into bitter resentment and cold silences. Derek, a construction foreman, had grown increasingly controlling and verbally abusive. He monitored her phone, questioned her every move, and erupted into rages over the smallest perceived slights. The fights had escalated, and though he'd never struck her, Sarah felt the threat lingering in every tense confrontation. Their 2 children, Emma, 8, and Lucas, 6, had become casualties of the toxic environment. Emma had grown withdrawn, her bright smile fading into anxious silence. Lucas developed nightmares, crying out in the dark for a safety that seemed increasingly out of reach. Sarah saw the damage in their eyes every morning, and the guilt was a constant weight pressing down on her chest. She'd thought about leaving countless times, but Derek's family had deep roots in Burlington. His father was a retired detective. His uncle sat on the city council. When Sarah had quietly consulted a lawyer, she'd been warned that custody battles could be brutal and unpredictable, especially when the opposing party had connections. The lawyer had looked at her with sympathetic eyes and said, "These cases can drag on for years, and sometimes, despite everything, they don't end the way they should." That night, Sarah had driven around Burlington for hours, unable to return home. The city she'd sworn to protect suddenly felt like a prison. She parked near Lake Champlain, watching the dark water lap against the frozen shore, and allowed herself to imagine something she'd never dared consider before: disappearing. It was December 14th, 2018, when Sarah Mitchell made her decision. She'd been working the night shift, patrolling the quiet residential streets on Burlington's eastern edge. At 2:47 a.m., she radioed in her location, a routine check near the intersection of North Street and Pearl, and then went silent. Her patrol car was found 3 hours later, parked outside a 24-hour convenience store, engine still running, driver's door slightly ajar. Her service weapon, badge, and personal effects were inside, but Sarah was gone. The initial response was immediate and massive. Every available officer joined the search. Helicopters scanned the surrounding woods. Dive teams checked the icy waters of Lake Champlain. The FBI was called in within 48 hours, treating it as a potential abduction of a law enforcement officer. Burlington hadn't seen this level of mobilized effort in decades. Derek played the devastated husband perfectly. He gave tearful interviews to local news stations, his voice breaking as he pleaded for Sarah's safe return. "She's an amazing mother, an incredible officer," he said, looking directly into the camera. "Emma and Lucas need their mom. I need my wife. Please, if anyone knows anything, come forward." The community rallied around him. Vigils were held. Blue ribbons appeared on trees throughout the city. Sarah's face was everywhere, on flyers, news broadcasts, social media. The hashtag, #Find Sarah Mitchell, trended locally for weeks. Detective James Holloway, a 20-year veteran of the department and Sarah's former training officer, led the investigation. James was a methodical man in his mid-50s, with graying hair and eyes that carried the weight of too many unsolved cases. He'd watched Sarah grow from a nervous rookie into a confident officer, and her disappearance hit him harder than he wanted to admit. The evidence painted a troubling picture. Sarah's bank accounts showed no unusual activity. Her phone's last ping came from the area where her patrol car was found, and then it went dark, either powered off or destroyed. Security footage from the convenience store showed Sarah entering at 2:51 a.m., purchasing a bottle of water, and leaving. She appeared calm, almost serene. That was the last confirmed sighting. James interviewed everyone in Sarah's life. Her parents, who lived in nearby Montpelier, were shocked and grief-stricken. Her colleagues reported nothing unusual about her behavior in the days leading up to her disappearance. But when James sat down with Derek for the third time, something felt off. Derek's grief seemed performative, his answers too rehearsed. When James asked about their marriage, Derek insisted everything was fine. "We had our ups and downs like any couple, but we were solid," he said. But James had been doing this job long enough to recognize the careful language of someone hiding something. He began digging deeper into the Mitchells' private life. Neighbors, when pressed, reluctantly admitted hearing frequent arguments. Emma's teacher mentioned the girl had become increasingly anxious and distracted at school. A patrol officer who'd responded to a noise complaint at the Mitchell residence 6 months earlier remembered Derek's hostility and Sarah's embarrassment, though no official report had been filed. The theory that began to form in James's mind was dark, but increasingly plausible. Domestic violence escalating to murder, with Derek disposing of Sarah's body and staging the scene to look like an abduction or voluntary disappearance. But there were problems with that theory. The timeline was tight. Derek had been verifiably at home when Sarah went missing, confirmed by security cameras at their apartment building. There was no physical evidence of violence in their home or in Sarah's patrol car, and despite extensive searches of the area, no body was found. As weeks turned into months, the case grew cold. Tips dried up. The media moved on to other stories. The department held a memorial service in April 2019, though technically Sarah was still listed as missing rather than deceased. James attended, standing at the back of the room, watching Derek hold Emma and Lucas close, while colleagues shared memories of Sarah. The whole thing felt wrong. James never stopped investigating. Even as other cases demanded his attention, he kept Sarah's file on his desk, reviewing it late at night when the department was empty. He tracked down Sarah's old friends from college, interviewed distant relatives, checked and rechecked financial records for any trace of her. He became obsessed, and his captain had to have a quiet word with him about letting it go. But James couldn't let it go, because deep down, beneath all the evidence and theories, he had a feeling that refused to fade. Sarah Mitchell wasn't dead. She was out there somewhere, alive. And if that was true, the question wasn't what happened to her. It was why she'd chosen to vanish. The children were the ones who suffered most visibly. Emma stopped speaking in school for 3 months after her mother disappeared. Lucas's nightmares intensified, and he began seeing a child psychologist twice a week. Derek enrolled them in a private school across town, away from the constant reminders and whispers. He told people he was trying to give them a fresh start. Burlington tried to move on, but Sarah's case lingered like a ghost in the collective consciousness of the city. Every few months, a new tip would come in. Someone thought they saw her in Montreal or Boston or New York. Each lead went nowhere. The mystery deepened, becoming one of those tragic stories communities carry with them, unsolved and haunting. What no one knew, what no one could have imagined, was that Sarah Mitchell had planned her disappearance with meticulous precision. For 6 months before that December night, she'd been preparing. Small cash withdrawals that wouldn't raise suspicion, a prepaid phone purchased under a false name, documents gathered and hidden. She'd researched identity change, studied cases of people who'd successfully disappeared, and identified a path forward that seemed impossible, but necessary. The night she vanished, Sarah hadn't been abducted. She'd walked away from her patrol car deliberately, meeting a contact she'd found through desperate online searches. Someone who specialized in helping people start over. It wasn't legal, it wasn't sanctioned, but for Sarah, it was the only way to save her children from a life of fear and herself, from a marriage that was slowly destroying her. She'd taken Emma and Lucas from their grandparents' house the following week, while Derek was at work and the media frenzy was at its peak. The children had been staying there, shielded from reporters and the chaos. Sarah had planned it down to the minute: the unlocked back door, the route that avoided security cameras, the pre-packed bags hidden in a rented storage unit across state lines. It was the most terrifying thing she'd ever done. But as she drove south through the darkness with her sleeping children in the backseat, Sarah Mitchell felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. By the time the sun rose on that cold December morning, they were already 5 states away, heading toward a new life that Sarah had barely dared to imagine. She knew what she was leaving behind: her career, her identity, the version of herself she'd spent 34 years building. She knew the investigation would focus on Derek. That suspicion might fall on him for something he didn't do. That guilt would haunt her. But when she looked at Emma and Lucas still innocent in sleep, she knew she'd made the only choice she could live with. The question wasn't whether she'd done the right thing. The question was how long she could keep them safe before the past caught up with her. The town of Laurel Springs, North Carolina, was the kind of place where people didn't ask too many questions. Nestled in the Blue Ridge Mountains, it was small enough to feel intimate, but large enough for newcomers to blend in without drawing excessive attention. The population hovered around 12,000, sustained by tourism, a few manufacturing plants, and the steady flow of people seeking refuge from larger cities. Sarah arrived there in late December 2018, just days after her disappearance from Burlington. She'd driven through the night, stopping only for gas and food, always paying in cash, always keeping her face turned away from security cameras. The children had been confused at first, asking questions she couldn't fully answer. "We're going on an adventure," she'd told them, forcing brightness into her voice. "Somewhere Daddy can't find us. Somewhere we'll be safe." Emma, old enough to understand more than Sarah wished, had simply nodded and held her brother's hand tighter. Lucas, still young enough to accept the world as adults presented it, had eventually fallen asleep against the window, his breath fogging the glass. The contact Sarah had found online, a woman who called herself Marion, had provided everything: forged documents, a new social security number, a birth certificate for each of them with different names. The quality was disturbingly good, the kind of work that spoke of years of experience helping people disappear. Marion had been cold and businesslike during their brief meeting at a rest stop outside Richmond, Virginia. She'd handed over a manila envelope and said, "Once you use these, Sarah Mitchell is dead. You understand that? No going back. No contacting anyone from your old life. One mistake and it all falls apart." Sarah had nodded, her hands shaking as she held the envelope. The price had been steep, $15,000, nearly everything she'd managed to save. But Marion had been clear: good fake identities weren't cheap, and anything less than perfect would get caught in the system within weeks. Now, as Sarah, or rather Jennifer Hayes as her new driver's license stated, pulled into Laurel Springs, she felt the weight of what she'd done settling over her like a heavy blanket. The main street was decorated for Christmas, lights strung between lampposts, storefronts displaying cheerful holiday scenes. It looked idyllic, almost surreal after the chaos and fear of the past week. She'd rented a small house on the outskirts of town through a Craigslist ad, paying 3 months in advance in cash to a landlord who'd seemed more interested in the money than her background. The house was modest, 2 bedrooms, a cramped kitchen, aging carpet, but it had a fenced backyard and was walking distance from the elementary school. It would do. The first months were the hardest. Emma and Lucas struggled with their new names. Emma was now Lily, and Lucas was Tyler. Sarah had to constantly remind them, drilling the new identities into their minds while trying not to frighten them further. She'd dyed her hair dark brown and cut it shorter, wore glasses she didn't need, changed her entire style of dress from practical police uniforms to casual civilian clothes that made her look softer, less authoritative. Finding work had been challenging. Her resume, now fabricated to match her new identity, claimed previous experience as an administrative assistant in small offices across the South. She couldn't reference her police training, couldn't lean on her real skills and experience. Instead, she took a job at a local medical clinic as a receptionist, answering phones and filing paperwork for $12 an hour. A humiliating step down from her police salary, but necessary. Her supervisor, a kind woman named Patricia who was in her 60s, seemed to sense Jennifer Hayes was running from something, though she never asked directly. "We all have our stories," Patricia had said during Sarah's second week, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "What matters is who you are now, not who you were before." Sarah had nearly broken down at those words, the kindness cutting through her carefully maintained composure. She'd excused herself to the bathroom and cried silently in a stall, overwhelmed by the loneliness of carrying such an enormous secret. The children adapted better than she'd expected, though the trauma of their disrupted lives manifested in different ways. Lily, Sarah had to consciously think of her daughter by the new name, became hypervigilant, constantly watching for threats, asking Sarah multiple times a day if they were safe, if Daddy was coming. Tyler developed a stutter that hadn't existed before, and clung to Sarah whenever she tried to leave for work. Sarah enrolled them in Laurel Springs Elementary in January 2019, her heart pounding as she submitted the forged documents to the school's administrative office. The secretary had barely glanced at them, more focused on getting the children properly registered and assigned to classrooms. It had been almost too easy, and that terrified Sarah more than if they'd been suspicious. She lived in constant fear those first months. Every police car that passed made her heart race. Every knock on the door sent adrenaline flooding through her system. She monitored news from Vermont obsessively on her prepaid phone, reading about the ongoing investigation into her disappearance, seeing Derek's tearful interviews, watching James Holloway make public appeals for information. The guilt was crushing. She knew what she'd done to James, to her colleagues who considered her family, to her parents who she couldn't contact without risking everything. She knew the investigation would consume resources, that Derek, despite his faults, was probably being treated as a suspect, his life scrutinized and torn apart. She knew her parents were grieving, believing their daughter was likely dead, but every time the guilt threatened to overwhelm her, she looked at her children and remembered why she'd done this. Lily was smiling again, tentatively at first, then more genuinely as weeks passed without the tension and fear that had saturated their old home. Tyler's nightmares became less frequent. They were healing, slowly, in this place where Derek's shadow couldn't reach them. Sarah established a routine, understanding that stability was crucial for the children's recovery and for maintaining their cover. Wake at 6, get the kids ready for school, drop them off by 7:30, work at the clinic until 5, pick up the children, make dinner, help with homework, bedtime by 8:30. Weekends were for grocery shopping, laundry, and quiet activities at home. She avoided making friends, kept interactions with neighbors polite but distant, never volunteered information about their past. But Laurel Springs was a small town, and isolation was difficult to maintain. The neighbor next door, an elderly man named Mr. Carson, took to waving at them each morning. The mother of one of Tyler's classmates invited them to a play date, and Sarah had to fabricate an excuse. The barista at the local coffee shop began recognizing her order and attempting small talk. It was exhausting, maintaining the fiction of Jennifer Hayes while constantly monitoring for any slip that might expose who she really was. Sarah found herself lying awake at night, replaying conversations, worrying that she'd revealed too much or that something in her demeanor had seemed off. The paranoia was relentless. 3 months into their new life, Sarah met David Chen. It was a Saturday afternoon in March, unseasonably warm, and Sarah had taken the children to the town's small park. Tyler was on the swings while Lily sat beside Sarah on a bench, drawing in a notebook. Sarah was watching her son, grateful to see him laughing, when a soccer ball rolled to her feet. "Sorry about that." A man jogged over, slightly out of breath, his dark hair windswept. He was in his late 30s, wearing a faded college t-shirt and jeans, with an easy smile that reached his eyes. "My daughter's got a strong kick, but questionable aim." Sarah handed him the ball, offering a polite smile but no conversation. She'd learned to deflect friendly overtures, to be pleasant but unmemorable. But David's daughter, a girl about Lily's age with her father's dark hair and bright, curious eyes, ran up and immediately noticed Lily's drawing. "That's really pretty. I'm Sophie. Want to play?" Before Sarah could intervene, Lily looked up and for the first time since they'd arrived in Laurel Springs, genuinely smiled at another child. "Okay, I'm Lily." The girls ran off together, and David settled onto the bench beside Sarah, maintaining a respectful distance. "New to town? I haven't seen you around before, and in Laurel Springs you notice newcomers." "Just moved here in December," Sarah said carefully, keeping her answer vague. "Needed a change of scenery." David nodded, seeming to understand there were boundaries not to cross. "Well, it's a good town for that. Quiet, safe, good schools. I moved here 5 years ago after my divorce. Sometimes starting over in a new place is exactly what you need." There was something in his tone, a recognition of shared experience, of understanding what it meant to rebuild, that made Sarah's defenses soften slightly. They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play, and for the first time in months, Sarah felt something close to normal. Over the following weeks, they kept running into each other, at the grocery store, at school pickup, at the park. David never pushed, never asked probing questions about Jennifer Hayes' past. He talked about his work as a freelance graphic designer, about Sophie's love of soccer and reading, about the challenges of single parenting. He made Sarah laugh with self-deprecating stories about his cooking disasters and his failed attempts to help Sophie with her math homework. Slowly, carefully, Sarah allowed a friendship to develop. David became someone she could talk to about the everyday struggles of parenting, about work frustrations at the clinic, about adjusting to small-town life. He never asked why she'd moved to Laurel Springs or where she'd come from before. That discretion, that respect for privacy, made Sarah trust him in a way she hadn't trusted anyone in years. By summer, Their children had become inseparable. Lily and Sophie were in the same class at school, participating in the same activities, having sleepovers at each other's houses. Tyler adored Sophie's patience with him, the way she included him in their games despite the age difference. The children's friendship naturally drew Sarah and David closer. One evening in July, after a backyard barbecue at David's house where the children had played until sunset, Sarah found herself sitting on his porch long after the kids had gone to bed inside. They'd been talking about nothing important, favorite movies, embarrassing childhood memories, when David grew quiet and looked at her with unusual seriousness. "Jennifer," he said, using the name she'd lived under for 7 months now, the name that still sometimes failed to register when called. "I want you to know that whatever brought you here, whatever you're running from or trying to leave behind, it doesn't matter to me. Who you are now, the mother you are to those kids, the person I've gotten to know, that's what matters." Sarah's throat tightened. She wanted to tell him everything, to unburden herself of the enormous secret she carried, but the risk was too great. Instead, she simply said, "Thank you. That means more than you know." David reached over and gently took her hand. It was the first time he'd touched her beyond casual friendly contact, and Sarah felt something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years, the possibility of connection, of being truly seen and accepted. Their relationship developed gradually over the next year. David was patient, never pushing for more than Sarah was ready to give. He understood there were parts of her past she couldn't or wouldn't share, and he accepted that. What they built together was based on who they were in the present, in Laurel Springs, as Jennifer and David, not on the complicated histories they'd left behind. By 2020, they were a family in all but name. David proposed in October, a simple, heartfelt moment in his living room with all 3 children present. Sarah said yes, knowing it meant cementing Jennifer Hayes as her permanent identity, knowing it meant burying Sarah Mitchell deeper. But when she looked at Lily and Tyler's excited faces, at Sophie's joy, at David's love and acceptance, she believed it was worth it. They married in a small ceremony at the town hall in November 2020, with just a few friends as witnesses. Sarah wore a simple dress, carried a small bouquet, and promised to love David for the rest of her life. As she said her vows, she tried not to think about the fact that she was already married, that Derek Mitchell was still her legal husband, that this marriage was technically invalid and possibly criminal. She was building a new life on a foundation of lies, but it was a life where her children were safe, where they could heal and grow without fear. That had to be enough. By early 2023, Jennifer Hayes had built what appeared to be a perfect life in Laurel Springs. She'd been promoted to office manager at the clinic, earning enough to contribute meaningfully to the household finances. David's graphic design business had flourished, landing several corporate clients that provided steady income. They'd moved from David's modest rental into a purchased 3-bedroom house on Maple Street, with a proper yard where the children could play, and a front porch where Sarah and David sat on summer evenings, watching fireflies emerge at dusk. Lily, now 13, had blossomed into a confident teenager. She excelled in school, played on the soccer team, and had a close group of friends. The anxious, withdrawn 8-year-old who'd arrived in Laurel Springs had been replaced by a girl who laughed freely and spoke her mind. Tyler, 11, was equally transformed. The nightmares had stopped years ago, his stutter had faded, and he'd discovered a passion for music, teaching himself guitar through YouTube videos. Sophie, now 14, had embraced Lily and Tyler as her siblings without reservation. The 3 children navigated the complexities of their blended family with remarkable grace. To anyone observing from outside, the Chen Hayes household was enviable. Loving parents, happy children, stability and warmth. But Sarah lived with a constant, gnawing anxiety that never fully disappeared. She'd become adept at hiding it, at maintaining the facade of Jennifer Hayes while Sarah Mitchell remained buried beneath layers of fabrication and time. Yet there were moments when the past threatened to break through, when she caught her reflection unexpectedly and didn't recognize herself, when she instinctively reached for the badge she no longer carried, when she heard sirens and felt the muscle memory of her training kick in before she could suppress it. The lies had accumulated over the years like sediment, layer upon layer until the weight of them felt crushing. She lied about her childhood, inventing stories about growing up in Georgia with parents who'd passed away years ago. She lied about old friends, past relationships, her education, every experience that had shaped her into the person she'd been before December 2018. David knew Jennifer Hayes, But he'd never known Sarah Mitchell, the woman who'd sworn an oath to uphold the law, who'd investigated crimes and comforted victims, who'd been respected and valued in a profession she'd genuinely loved. Sometimes, late at night when David was asleep beside her, Sarah allowed herself to think about Burlington. She wondered about James Holloway, whether he'd retired or was still working cases. She wondered about her parents now in their 70s, and whether they'd found any peace after their daughter's disappearance. She wondered about Derek, whether he'd remarried, moved on, or whether he was still trapped in the aftermath of what she'd done. She never searched for information about herself online anymore. In the early days, the temptation had been overwhelming, but she'd quickly realized how dangerous it was. Every search left digital footprints, potential trails that could lead investigators to her current location. She'd disciplined herself to sever all connection to her former life, no matter how desperately she wanted to know what had happened after she vanished. But in March 2023, the past found her anyway. It started innocuously enough. Lily came home from school excited about a class project, a deep dive into unsolved mysteries and cold cases in America. Each student had to research a case, present their findings, and discuss theories about what might have happened. It was exactly the kind of project that would have fascinated Sarah in her former life. As Jennifer, it made her blood run cold. "Mom, you should see some of these cases," Lily said, spreading her research materials across the kitchen table. "There's this woman in Vermont who just vanished in 2018. She was a police officer and they never found any trace of her. Her patrol car was running, everything inside, but she was just gone. Isn't that crazy?" Sarah's hands trembled as she stirred the pasta sauce on the stove. She kept her back to Lily, steadying her voice before responding. "That does sound mysterious. What do you think happened to her?" "Well, some people think her husband killed her because neighbors said they fought a lot, but they never found a body or any evidence. Other people think maybe she ran away because she was unhappy. There's even this detective who still works the case, Detective Holloway. He gave an interview last year saying he believes she's alive somewhere, starting over." Lily paused, and Sarah could hear the rustle of papers. "Her kids were my age when she disappeared. A girl and a boy. I wonder what happened to them." Sarah gripped the edge of the counter, forcing herself to breathe normally. "That's heartbreaking. Those poor children." "Yeah." Lily was quiet for a moment. "But maybe she had a good reason for leaving. Maybe she was protecting them from something. I mean, if the husband was abusive like people said, maybe running away was the only option. It's not legal or anything, but I kind of understand why someone might do that." The perceptiveness of Lily's observation shattered something inside Sarah. Her daughter, intelligent, empathetic Lily, was analyzing Sarah's own case without knowing it, coming to conclusions that were dangerously close to the truth. Sarah turned from the stove and looked at her daughter, seeing the 13-year-old who could articulate concepts of protection and sacrifice, who could imagine circumstances where breaking the law might be morally justified. "Did you pick that case for your project?" Sarah asked carefully. "No, I chose a different one, but this one stuck with me." Lily looked up, her eyes, Derek's eyes, though Sarah tried not to think about that, meeting her mother's. "Do you think people can really just disappear like that? Start completely over?" "I think," Sarah said slowly, "that people are capable of extraordinary things when they're desperate, when they feel like there's no other way to protect the people they love." Lily nodded thoughtfully, then gathered her papers. "I'm going to work on my project upstairs. Dinner smells good, by the way." After Lily left, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She'd come so close to exposure, saved only by the fact that Lily had chosen a different case. But the incident revealed how precarious her situation remained. One curious child, one school project, one random internet search could unravel everything. That night, she couldn't sleep. David noticed her restlessness, pulling her close. "You okay? You've been tense all evening." "Just work stress," she lied, adding another deception to the mountain she'd already built. "Budget issues at the clinic. Nothing serious." But it was serious, because for the first time in years, Sarah was forced to confront what would happen if the truth came out. Lily and Tyler had been young enough when they left Burlington that their memories of that life had faded, replaced by the stability and happiness they'd found in Laurel Springs. They remembered their father only vaguely. Tyler sometimes mentioned him in passing, confused recollections of a loud voice and being scared, but nothing concrete. Lily remembered more but rarely spoke about it. If the truth emerged now, the children would learn that their mother was wanted for custodial kidnapping, that their entire existence in North Carolina was built on fraud, that Jennifer Hayes was an identity constructed to hide a fugitive. They'd learned their father was still in Vermont, that he'd spent years searching for them, that Sarah had let him and everyone else believe she might be dead. The revelation would destroy the trust and security Sarah had worked so hard to rebuild. And David, what would he think? Their marriage wasn't legally valid. She'd deceived him about everything fundamental to her identity. He'd fallen in love with a fabrication, raised his daughter alongside children he believed were simply from his wife's previous relationship, never knowing they were technically kidnapped, that their mother was fleeing criminal charges if ever discovered. The risk extended beyond her family. Patricia at the clinic, the friends they'd made in Laurel Springs, Sophie's school, their neighbors. Everyone would learn that Jennifer Hayes was a lie. Sarah would face criminal charges, custodial interference, identity fraud, possibly more depending on how prosecutors wanted to pursue it. The children would be placed in state custody during the legal proceedings, potentially returned to Derek while Sarah fought the case. Everything she'd built would collapse. And yet, Sarah couldn't bring herself to regret the choice she'd made that December night in 2018. Because when she looked at her children now, healthy, happy, thriving, she knew that the alternative would have been worse. Staying in Burlington meant staying trapped in a deteriorating marriage with a man whose control and anger were escalating. It meant watching her children absorb that toxicity, normalizing dysfunction, developing their own trauma responses. She'd saved them, but the cost of that salvation was permanent exile from the person she'd been, and constant fear that the exile would end. 2 weeks after the school project conversation, Sarah experienced another close call. She was at the grocery store methodically working through her shopping list when she heard a voice she recognized. The accent, the cadence, the particular inflection. It was unmistakably from New England, specifically Vermont. Sarah froze in the cereal aisle, her heart hammering. She carefully peered around the end cap and saw a woman in her 50s talking on her phone while examining produce. The woman looked vaguely familiar, but Sarah couldn't place her. A former neighbor? Someone from the police department's administrative staff? The woman was saying, "Moved down here to be closer to my daughter. Vermont winters were getting to be too much. Yes, Burlington. Lived there my whole life until last month." Sarah abandoned her shopping cart and walked quickly toward the exit, keeping her face averted. She sat in her car in the parking lot, hands gripping the steering wheel, telling herself to calm down. The woman probably didn't know her, wouldn't recognize her even if they'd crossed paths years ago. Sarah looked different now. Darker hair, glasses, 5 years older, dressed differently, carrying herself differently. But the incident reinforced how vulnerable she remained. Laurel Springs wasn't remote enough, isolated enough. People moved, relocated, ended up in unexpected places. The world was simultaneously vast and impossibly small. Anyone from her past could appear at any moment. She started avoiding the grocery store during peak hours, shopping early in the morning or late at night. She became more vigilant about checking her surroundings, watching for anyone who might scrutinize her too closely. The paranoia that had faded over years of relative safety came roaring back. David noticed the change. "Jen, you're on edge constantly. What's going on?" "I'm fine," she insisted, but her voice carried a tremor she couldn't quite control. "Just tired. Work has been demanding." He didn't believe her. She could see it in his eyes. But David had always respected boundaries, never pushed when she withdrew. Now, though, Sarah wondered if his patience was running out, if the foundation of trust their marriage required was beginning to crack under the weight of her secrets. In June, another incident occurred that brought Sarah dangerously close to exposure. Tyler came home upset, his eyes red from crying. When Sarah asked what happened, he said a kid at school had called him and Lily the abandoned kids whose real mom probably dumped them because they weren't wanted. Sarah pulled him close, feeling fury at the cruel child and terror at the implication. "That's not true, Tyler. Not even remotely true. You and Lily are loved more than you can imagine. But why don't we ever talk about our real dad?" Tyler asked, his voice small. "Sophie talks about her mom sometimes, even though her parents are divorced, but we never mention ours. It's like he doesn't exist." Sarah had prepared for this conversation, rehearsed various versions over the years, but actually having it felt like walking through a minefield blindfolded. "Your father wasn't a good man, Tyler. He was angry a lot and he made us feel unsafe. I had to get us away from him to protect you and Lily. I know that's hard to understand, but everything I've done has been to keep you both safe and happy. So we ran away?" The simple question, asked with such innocent directness, nearly broke her. "Yes, we did. Tyler processed this, his young face serious. Did he try to find us? Probably, but he couldn't. We're safe here, Tyler, I promise you're safe. He nodded slowly, seeming to accept this explanation. But Sarah knew the questions would continue, would evolve as the children grew older and their capacity for understanding deepened. Eventually, they'd want details she couldn't provide without exposing the truth. Eventually, the simplified narrative of escaping an abusive situation wouldn't be enough. That night, after the children were asleep, Sarah stood in the bathroom staring at her reflection. Jennifer Hayes looked back at her, a woman in her late 30s with dark hair and glasses, laugh lines forming around her eyes. Someone who'd built a good life in a small North Carolina town. But underneath, Sarah Mitchell remained, buried but not dead, her past waiting like a dormant fault line that could fracture without warning. She'd been living on borrowed time for nearly 5 years. Every day that passed without discovery felt like a gift, but also like drawing closer to an inevitable reckoning. Sarah had started to believe in her more hopeful moments that perhaps she'd gotten away with it, that enough time had passed for her case to be permanently cold, forgotten except by a few dedicated investigators who'd eventually retire or move on. But deep down, she knew the truth. The past never stayed buried forever. And when it finally surfaced, the life she'd built would be tested in ways she could barely imagine. The call came on a Tuesday morning in September 2023, 5 years after Sarah had vanished from Burlington. She was at work, organizing patient files in the clinic's back office when Patricia poked her head in, her expression troubled. "Jennifer, there's someone here to see you, says it's personal." Sarah's stomach dropped. "Who is it?" "Didn't give a name, just said it was important and he needed to speak with you privately." Patricia hesitated. "He's got that look, you know, official, like maybe a lawyer or something." Sarah's hands went numb. She forced herself to breathe to maintain composure. "I'll be right out." She took a moment in the bathroom first, splashing cold water on her face, checking her appearance in the mirror. "Jennifer Hayes," she reminded herself. "You are Jennifer Hayes. You've lived in Laurel Springs for nearly 5 years. You have nothing to hide." But when she walked into the waiting room and saw the man standing by the window, her carefully constructed world began to crumble. He was in his late 50s, gray hair, weathered face, wearing a suit that had seen better days. And even though he'd aged and she'd changed, Sarah recognized him immediately. Detective James Holloway from the Burlington Police Department. Their eyes met across the room, and Sarah watched recognition dawn on his face. For a moment, neither of them moved. The clinic's ambient noise, the murmur of other patients, the soft music from the speakers, Patricia typing at her desk, faded into background static. James spoke first, his voice carefully neutral. "Ms. Hayes? I wonder if we could talk somewhere private." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice. She led him to a small consultation room the doctors used for difficult conversations with patients. It felt grimly appropriate. Once the door closed behind them, the pretense fell away. "Sarah," James said, and hearing her real name spoken aloud after 5 years of answering to Jennifer felt like a physical blow. "I've been looking for you for a long time." She sank into one of the chairs, her legs suddenly unable to support her. "How did you find me?" James sat across from her, pulling out a worn notebook, the same type he'd always carried during investigations. "Facial recognition software. The technology has improved significantly in the last few years. The department uploaded your photo to a national database that scans social media, public records, security footage. Got a hit 3 months ago from a photo posted by the Laurel Springs Elementary School, their soccer team's end-of-season celebration. A girl named Lily Hayes who looks remarkably like Emma Mitchell." Of course. Lily had been so excited about that photo, proudly showing Sarah the team picture posted on the school's Facebook page. Sarah had looked at it briefly, relieved that she wasn't in the frame, never imagining that her daughter's face would be the breadcrumb trail that led investigators to their door. "Once I had that lead," James continued, "it wasn't hard to find Jennifer Hayes, office manager at a local medical clinic, married to David Chen, mother of 2 children who matched the approximate ages of Emma and Lucas Mitchell." He paused, his expression unreadable. "You've built quite a life here, Sarah." "They go by Lily and Tyler now," Sarah said quietly. "And I go by Jennifer. Those are our names. That's who we are." "That's who you're pretending to be," James corrected gently. "But we both know the truth." Sarah looked up at him, seeing the man who'd been her mentor, who'd taught her how to conduct interviews, how to read crime scenes, how to be a good cop. "Are you here to arrest me?" "I'm here to understand," James said. "For 5 years, Sarah, I've been trying to figure out what happened to you. I've pursued every lead, interviewed hundreds of people, spent countless hours working this case. I've had Derek under surveillance, convinced he'd killed you, and disposed of your body so well we'd never find it. I've searched landfills and lakes and forests. And all that time you were here alive, living under a fake name with your children. The weight of guilt Sarah had carried for 5 years pressed down harder. I'm sorry, James. I'm sorry for what I put you through, what I put everyone through. But I didn't have a choice. There's always a choice, James said, but his tone wasn't accusatory. It was tired, sad. Help me understand yours. So Sarah told him everything. About Derek's escalating control and verbal abuse. About the fear that had become her constant companion. About watching her children absorb the toxicity of their home environment. She told him about consulting the lawyer who'd warned her that custody battles were unpredictable, especially when the opposing party had family connections in local law enforcement and government. She told him about the impossible decision she'd faced. Stay and watch her children suffer or disappear and give them a chance at a healthy life. I know what I did was illegal, Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. I know I hurt people who cared about me. My parents, my colleagues, you. But James, if you'd seen what I saw, the fear in my children's eyes, the way they walked on eggshells around their own father, the way Lily stopped smiling and Lucas started having nightmares, you'd understand why I felt like I had no other option. James listened without interrupting, his expression neutral but his eyes betraying deep emotion. When Sarah finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Derek filed a missing persons report within hours of your disappearance, James finally said. He played the devastated husband perfectly, gave tearful interviews, organized search parties, the whole performance. And for a long time I bought it. But the more I investigated, the more I uncovered about his behavior, the pattern of control and intimidation. Neighbors came forward eventually, people who'd been too afraid or too polite to say anything before. A picture emerged of a man who was psychologically abusive, manipulative. Sarah felt a surge of vindication mixed with regret. So you know I was telling the truth about what our marriage was like. I do now, James acknowledged. But Sarah, the way you handled this, disappearing without a trace, taking the children without legal authority, creating false identities, it's a crime. Multiple crimes. And there are people in Vermont who want justice, who want answers. Your parents deserve to know you're alive. Derek, despite everything, has legal rights as the children's father. He has no rights to traumatize them, Sarah said fiercely. I protected my children from harm. That's my job as their mother. The courts would argue that's their job, James said, that there are legal mechanisms for handling domestic abuse situations. Emergency custody orders, protective orders, relocation provisions in divorce proceedings. And how often do those work, James? Sarah challenged. How many domestic violence victims go through the proper legal channels and still end up dead? How many children get sent back to abusive households because judges don't believe the accusations or the abuser presents well in court? I couldn't risk it. I couldn't put my faith in a system that fails women and children every single day. James rubbed his face wearily. I'm not saying you're wrong, I've seen those failures too. I've worked cases where we all knew what was happening but couldn't prove it, where victims were trapped by legal technicalities and bureaucratic inefficiency. But Sarah, you have to understand the position this puts everyone in now. Are you going to arrest me? Sarah asked again, her voice steadier this time. I should, James said. Technically, the moment I confirmed your identity, I should have called it in, had local authorities take you into custody, started extradition proceedings back to Vermont. But I wanted to talk to you first, to understand. And now that you do, James looked at her for a long moment. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me, the cop part, knows there have to be consequences. You can't just disappear and expect no accountability. But the part of me that knew you, that trained you, that saw what a good officer and person you were, that part wants to believe you did what you had to do. What are you going to do, James? He stood, pacing the small room. I need to think. This isn't a decision I can make lightly. There are protocols, procedures, chain of command issues. But Sarah, you need to prepare for the possibility that this doesn't end well, that there will be legal consequences, that your children might be taken from you during the proceedings, that your life here will be destroyed. The clinical detachment in his voice terrified her more than anger would have. This wasn't a friend offering comfort. This was a detective laying out harsh realities. How long do I have? Sarah asked. I'm staying in town for a few days, at the Laurel Springs Inn. James moved toward the door, then paused. I want to meet them. Emma and Lucas. Lily and Tyler, I mean. I want to see for myself that they're okay, that this was worth what you sacrificed. Sarah nodded, though the thought of James meeting her children filled her with dread. Tonight. Come to dinner. We live at 428 Maple Street. After James left, Sarah sat alone in the consultation room for nearly 20 minutes, trying to process what had happened. 5 years of careful construction, of building a new life, of protecting her children, all of it now balanced on the edge of James Holloway's decision. She couldn't go back to work. She told Patricia she was sick, which wasn't entirely a lie. She felt nauseous, disoriented, her hands shaking uncontrollably. She drove home in a daze, her mind racing through scenarios, each worse than the last. David was working from home that day. He looked up from his computer when Sarah walked in, immediately sensing something was wrong. Jen? What happened? You look like you've seen a ghost. Sarah almost laughed at the accuracy of the metaphor. We need to talk, but not until tonight. There's someone coming to dinner, someone from my past. And David, I need to tell you the truth. All of it. The confusion and concern on his face broke her heart. What truth? Jen, you're scaring me. I know, and I'm sorry, but please just trust me until tonight. Pick up Sophie from school like normal, and when Lily and Tyler get home, we'll all sit down together. Together? You want the kids there for this conversation? They need to hear it too, Sarah said. They need to understand what's happening before. She couldn't finish the sentence, couldn't voice the fear that this might be one of their last nights as a family. David clearly wanted to press for more information, but something in Sarah's expression stopped him. He simply nodded, pulled her into an embrace, and said, Whatever it is, we'll figure it out. Together. Sarah held on to him tightly, drawing strength from his presence while silently screaming at the unfairness of it all. David had done nothing wrong. He'd fallen in love with someone who'd seemed genuine and real, who'd presented herself honestly in every way except the most fundamental. He'd built a life with her, raised his daughter alongside her children, trusted her completely, and now she was about to shatter that trust, reveal that their entire relationship was founded on deception, and possibly drag him into legal jeopardy for unknowingly harboring a fugitive. The afternoon passed in agonizing slow motion. Sarah went through mechanical motions, straightening the house, starting dinner preparations, while her mind spun in endless cycles of anxiety. When Lily and Tyler got home from school, they chattered about their day, oblivious to the storm gathering around them. Sarah watched them, memorizing their faces, their gestures, their laughter, terrified this might be the last day they could simply be children unburdened by the weight of adult decisions and consequences. At 6 o'clock, James Holloway knocked on the door. David answered, introducing himself with characteristic friendliness before leading James to the living room, where Sarah waited with the children. Everyone, Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady despite the terror coursing through her. This is James. He's an old friend of mine from before we moved here. James, this is my husband David, his daughter Sophie, and my children Lily and Tyler. James shook hands with David, smiled at Sophie, then turned his attention to Lily and Tyler. Sarah watched him study their faces, seeing the recognition in his eyes. These were undeniably the children he'd been searching for. Lily, now 13, had lost the baby roundness of her face but retained the distinctive features she'd inherited from both parents. Tyler, at 11, was starting to look more like a young man than a child, but his eyes were the same ones that had looked at James 5 years ago in Burlington when he'd visited their home during the investigation. It's nice to meet you all, James said quietly. You have a beautiful home. Dinner was surreal. The children ate and talked normally, telling James about school, their activities, their friends. Sophie dominated the conversation, characteristically outgoing and friendly, while Lily was more reserved but polite. Tyler showed James his guitar, proudly demonstrating a song he'd recently learned. To any outside observer, it would have seemed like an ordinary family dinner with a guest, but Sarah could barely eat, could barely participate in the conversation. David kept glancing at her, clearly sensing the undercurrent of tension, and James, while genuinely engaging with the children, was simultaneously conducting an assessment, evaluating their well-being, their adjustment, the family dynamics. After dinner, after the children had been sent upstairs to do homework, the three adults sat in the living room. The moment of truth had arrived. David, Sarah began, her voice trembling, there's something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you 5 years ago but couldn't. My name isn't Jennifer Hayes, it's Sarah Mitchell. I'm a fugitive from Vermont, wanted for custodial kidnapping and identity fraud. James is the detective who's been investigating my disappearance. And everything you know about me, about my past, about who I am, it's been a lie." The silence that followed was deafening. David stared at her, his face cycling through shock, confusion, disbelief. "What? No, that's... Jen, this isn't funny." "It's not a joke," Sarah said, tears streaming down her face. "My real name is Sarah Mitchell. I was a police officer in Burlington, Vermont. I was married to a man named Derek who was abusive and controlling. I was terrified for my children's safety. So in December 2018, I faked my disappearance, took Emma and Lucas, and ran. I bought fake identities, changed our names, and came here to start over. And then I met you, and I fell in love with you. And I wanted so badly to tell you the truth, but I couldn't risk it. I couldn't risk losing everything I'd built, everything I'd sacrificed for." David stood abruptly, backing away from her as if she'd become a stranger, which, Sarah realized with crushing sadness, she had. "You've been lying to me for 5 years? Our entire relationship is built on fraud. The feelings are real," Sarah said desperately. "My love for you is real. The person I am with you, the mother I am to our children, that's real. Only the name and the history are fake." "Only?" David's voice rose. "Jennifer, Sarah, whoever you are, you just told me our marriage isn't legal, that you're wanted by the police, that you've been using me and Sophie as cover for your escape. How am I supposed to process this?" James stood, his presence commanding attention. "Mr. Chen, I understand this is shocking, and but I need you to understand the situation Sarah was in. I've spent 5 years investigating this case and what I've learned about her ex-husband, about the environment those children were living in. It was toxic and potentially dangerous. Sarah made a desperate choice in an impossible situation. That doesn't make it right," David said, but his anger was giving way to confusion and hurt. "That doesn't make lying to me for 5 years acceptable." "No, it doesn't," James agreed. "But context matters. And now you need to decide how to move forward, because the decisions made in the next few days will determine what happens to this family." David looked between James and Sarah, his expression devastated. "What happens now? Are you here to arrest her?" "I don't know yet," James said honestly. "I need to think about what the right thing to do is. For Sarah, for the children, for justice. It's not a simple answer." Sarah watched her husband struggle with information that had rewritten his entire understanding of their life together. She saw the moment he looked toward the stairs, thinking about Lily and Tyler, about Sophie who loved them like siblings. Whatever anger he felt toward Sarah, his protective instinct toward the children remained. "They can't know," David said quietly. "Not yet. Not until we figure out what's happening. They're just kids. They don't deserve to have their world destroyed." "Agreed," James said, "which is why I'm going to take some time to think about this. Sarah, you have 48 hours, then I need to make a decision. Use that time to prepare, to figure out what you're going to do if I decide I have to report this." After James left, Sarah and David sat in painful silence. Finally, David spoke, his voice hollow. "I need some time to process this. I'm going to sleep in the guest room tonight. David, please, I just need space, Sarah, or Jennifer. I don't even know what to call you anymore." He stood, moving toward the stairs, then paused. "I do love you. That's what makes this so impossibly hard. Because the person I fell in love with is real to me. But apparently she doesn't actually exist." Sarah watched him climb the stairs, feeling the first pieces of her rebuilt life begin to crumble. Upstairs, she could hear the children getting ready for bed, their voices carrying down, Lily laughing at something Tyler said, Sophie singing softly in her room. Normal sounds from a normal evening in what had seemed like a normal family. But nothing was normal anymore. The past had caught up with her, and Sarah had no idea if she could survive what came next. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed alone, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around her. Every creak and groan seemed amplified in the darkness, like the physical structure itself was responding to the fractures in the foundation of their lives. Down the hall, David was in the guest room, and the distance between them felt vast and insurmountable. At 3 a.m, Sarah gave up on sleep and went downstairs. She made coffee and sat at the kitchen table, the same table where they'd shared countless family meals, where the children did homework, where she and David had planned their future together. Now it felt like sitting in a museum, surrounded by artifacts from a life that was already slipping into the past. Her phone sat in front of her, dark and silent. She'd resisted the urge to search for information about her case for 5 years, but now the temptation was overwhelming. If James had found her through facial recognition, what else was out there? What had the investigation concluded? What had happened to Derek? She picked up the phone, her hands shaking, and opened an incognito browser. She typed slowly, "Sarah Mitchell, Burlington, Vermont, missing." The results flooded the screen. News articles, missing person databases, true crime forums, even a podcast episode dedicated to her disappearance. Sarah's breath caught as she clicked on the first article, dated from April 2023, just 5 months ago. 5 years later, Burlington officer's disappearance remains unsolved. The article featured a recent photo of James Holloway standing in front of the police department, looking older and more tired than when she'd last seen him in person. Yesterday, she reminded herself with surreal disbelief. The reporter had interviewed him extensively. Detective Holloway has never given up hope of finding Officer Mitchell or discovering what happened to her, the article stated. Despite limited leads and no physical evidence, he continues to work the case during his off hours, refusing to let it go cold. There was a quote from James. "Sarah Mitchell was a dedicated officer and a devoted mother. Someone knows what happened to her. Whether she's out there somewhere, living under a new identity, or whether something more sinister occurred, the truth needs to come out. Her children deserve answers. Her family deserves closure." Sarah's eyes blurred with tears. James had been searching for her not just as a detective pursuing a case, but as someone who genuinely cared, who wanted to bring her home. And she'd let him suffer with uncertainty for 5 years. She scrolled further, finding an article from 2021 that made her stomach turn. Derek had been arrested for assaulting a woman he'd been dating, charges that were later dropped when the woman refused to testify. The pattern Sarah had feared, the escalation she'd predicted, had continued after her disappearance. She'd been right to run, right to protect her children from him, but the validation of her decision didn't ease the guilt of how she'd done it. There were forum posts analyzing her case, amateur detectives offering theories. Some thought she'd been murdered, her body hidden where it would never be found. Others speculated she'd been kidnapped by someone she'd arrested during her career, revenge from a criminal she'd helped put away. A few, remarkably perceptive few, suggested she'd run away deliberately, creating a new life somewhere far from Burlington. One post from a user named TruthSeeker2019 had written, "Everyone focuses on the husband. But what if Officer Mitchell just couldn't take it anymore? What if she looked at her life and decided the only way out was to disappear? I'm not saying it's right, but maybe it's understandable." Sarah felt a strange kinship with this anonymous internet stranger who'd come closer to the truth than any official investigator had. Until James. She found articles about her parents. They'd given interviews on the first and second anniversaries of her disappearance. Her mother's face gaunt with grief, her father aged beyond his years. In the most recent article from December 2022, they'd established a scholarship fund in Sarah's name at the University of Vermont, supporting women pursuing careers in law enforcement. "We still hope for a miracle," her mother had said. "Every day we hope the phone will ring and it will be Sarah telling us she's okay. But we also need to face reality and honor her memory, whether she's alive somewhere or gone from this world." Sarah closed the browser and put her head down on the table, sobbing silently. She thought she understood the collateral damage of her decision, but seeing it documented, reading the pain in her parents' words, confronting the years James had spent searching, it was overwhelming. "Mom?" Sarah's head jerked up. Lily stood in the doorway wearing pajamas, her hair sleep-mussed, concern etched on her young face. "Why are you crying? Is something wrong?" Sarah quickly wiped her eyes, forcing a smile that felt grotesque. "I'm okay, sweetheart. Just couldn't sleep. What are you doing up? I heard you come downstairs." Lily moved closer, sliding into the chair beside Sarah. At 13, she was perceptive enough to know when she was being lied to. "Mom, something's going on. That man at dinner, James, he wasn't just an old friend, was he?" Sarah's carefully constructed walls were crumbling faster than she could rebuild them. "What makes you say that? The way you looked at each other. The way David's been acting weird since dinner. The way you've been crying down here by yourself." Lily paused, then said quietly, "And I heard you call yourself Sarah just before I came in." The world tilted. Sarah stared at her daughter, this intelligent, observant young woman who'd somehow heard the one word that could unravel everything. "Lily, is that your real name? Sarah?" Lily's voice was steady, but her eyes showed fear. "Are we in trouble? Are we going to have to move again?" Sarah realized she'd reached a breaking point. She could continue lying, could fabricate another story to explain away what Lily had heard. Or she could tell her daughter the truth, treat her with the respect she deserved, and prepare her for what might be coming. "My name is Sarah Mitchell," she said slowly. "I was born in Vermont. I was a police officer. And yes, we might be in trouble." Lily absorbed this, her face carefully neutral, a coping mechanism Sarah recognized because she developed it herself as a child. "What kind of trouble?" "The kind where I made a decision 5 years ago that was illegal but necessary to protect you and your brother. The kind where a detective from my past found us and now has to decide whether to arrest me." Sarah took her daughter's hand. "Lily, I need you to understand something. Everything I've done, every choice I've made has been to keep you and Tyler safe. But that doesn't mean there won't be consequences." "From Dad? Our real dad in Vermont?" The question hung in the air. Sarah had avoided this conversation for 5 years, but there was no escape now. "Yes, your father, Derek, was not a kind man. He was angry and controlling, and living with him wasn't safe for any of us. So I took you and Tyler and I ran. I changed our names and started over." "That's kidnapping," Lily said, and Sarah was struck by how matter-of-fact her daughter sounded. "We learned about it in social studies. Taking someone's kids without permission is a felony." "Yes, it is. So you're a criminal." The blunt assessment should have hurt more than it did, but Sarah was beyond pain at this point. "Legally, yes. Morally, I believe I did what I had to do." Lily was quiet for a long moment, processing. When she finally spoke, her voice was small and uncertain in a way it hadn't been in years. "Are they going to take us away from you? Are we going to have to go back to him?" "I don't know, baby, I honestly don't know. I don't remember him very well," Lily admitted. "Sometimes I try, but it's all blurry. Just feelings mostly. Being scared, hearing yelling, you crying in the bathroom." She looked up at Sarah, tears forming. "But I remember feeling safe after we left. Even when we were driving and I didn't understand where we were going, I felt safer than I had in a long time." Sarah pulled her daughter close, holding her tightly. "You were so brave, Lily. You and Tyler both. You adapted to a new place, new names, a whole new life, and you did it with such strength." "Does Tyler know about this?" "Not yet. He was younger when we left. His memories are even less clear than yours." "Are you going to tell him?" "I have to. Depending on what Detective Holloway decides, Tyler needs to be prepared." Sarah pulled back, looking into Lily's eyes. "But right now I need to know, are you okay?" "I know this is a lot to process." Lily absorbed the truth. "I don't know if I'm okay, but I'm not mad you protected us." "David doesn't know, does he?" "He found out last night," Sarah said. "He's in the guest room. Is he going to leave us?" "I hope not. He has every right to be angry." At dawn, David found them at the table. "Are you okay, kiddo?" he asked. "Are you?" Lily shot back. "Honestly? No," he admitted. "I feel betrayed, but your mom faced an impossible choice. Whatever happens between us, you and Tyler are my family." After Lily left for school, David told Sarah he needed time and the full truth. She explained Derek's abuse, the desperate decision to disappear, the false IDs. "Sorry isn't enough," he said, "but I'm not ready to give up if there are no more secrets." They agreed to tell the kids that night. Tyler asked if they were in trouble and if they'd have to leave. "No," David said. "We're staying. You're safe." Relief softened the room. Alone again, the conflict flared. Sarah's plan to run if arrested versus David's plea to face the system. "You were a cop," he said. "When did you lose faith?" "When I saw it fail women and children," she answered. Tyler overheard, frightened. They reassured him. No one was leaving. Afterward, Sarah received a text. "This is James. Meet me at Laurel Springs Park at noon. Come alone." On the bench where she'd first met David, Detective James Holloway said what it cost him. 5 years chasing her case, duty versus justice. "Arresting you would compound a tragedy," he said, "but looking away risks my career." After a long pause, he chose mercy. He would report a false lead and walk away on 3 conditions. Contact your parents and let them know you're alive. Stop running. Keep the children stable in Laurel Springs. Live with the consequences, without denial, and without letting guilt destroy you. "Don't make me regret this," he warned. "I won't," Sarah promised. David's reply came minutes later. "Yes, we need to figure this out together." That one word, together, gave Sarah hope. Maybe they could rebuild, maybe not. But for the first time in years, she was ready to stop running and face the truth. Their conversation lasted for hours. Morning light filtered through the windows as Sarah told him everything. Her marriage to Derek, the abuse, the fear, the decision to disappear, the false documents. David listened in silence, emotions shifting from anger to heartbreak. "I understand why you ran," he said finally. "But you brought me into this without consent. You let me love a lie. Even our marriage isn't legal." "I know," Sarah whispered, "and I'm sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix this," he replied softly, "but I'm not ready to give up. I just need time and honesty. No more secrets." Relief washed over her. "Anything. I'll tell you everything." They talked all morning, about her childhood, her years as a police officer, her parents, her life before it all fell apart. Gradually, David began to see that Sarah and Jennifer were not two people, but one, flawed, frightened, real. By afternoon, he said, "We need to tell the kids." That evening, they gathered the 3 children in the living room. Sarah explained gently that she had once been married to someone cruel, that she had changed their names and run to protect them. Tyler's eyes widened. "So we really did run away? It wasn't a dream?" "It was real," Sarah said, "and I'm sorry." Lily remembered the fear and the night they left. "I knew you were protecting us," she said. Sophie admitted she'd always sensed something was different. "What happens now?" Tyler asked. "Nothing changes," David assured them. "This is our home. We're safe." "And the detective?" Sophie asked. "He's not coming after us," Sarah said. "He understands." Tyler smiled with relief. "So I can stay, Tyler?" "You can stay, Tyler," Sarah said, hugging him tight. "We're not running anymore." That night on the porch under the North Carolina stars, David spoke again. "You need to contact your parents. They deserve to know you're alive." Sarah hesitated. "How do I even begin?" "Start simple. The truth is enough." Later at the kitchen table, she wrote the hardest letter of her life. "Dear Mom and Dad, I'm alive, I'm safe, and I'm sorry. I had to disappear to protect the children. Please don't try to find us. Just know that we're happy, healthy, and thinking of you. I love you forever, Sarah." The next morning, she mailed it from a distant post office with no return address. It was all she could give them, closure without reunion. Weeks turned into months. David moved back into their room. They went to counseling, rebuilding trust piece by piece. The children adapted. Lily relieved to have the truth. Tyler curious but calm. Sophie steady as ever. At work, Patricia's quiet wisdom stayed with Sarah. "We all have chapters we'd rather not revisit. What matters is who we choose to be next." That became her mantra. She couldn't undo the lies, but she could live truthfully now. Then one October evening, her phone rang. Unknown number. Her heart pounded. "Jennifer," came a trembling voice. Sarah froze. "Who is this?" "It's Mom, Sarah. I got your letter." Sarah collapsed to the floor, tears choking her voice. "Mom. Oh God, Mom." Her mother's voice trembled. "We just needed to hear you, to know it was really you." They spoke for 20 minutes. Sarah shared careful details about her children. Her mother spoke of her father's health and the memorial they'd once held for her. "For 5 years we thought you were dead," her mother said. "I'm so sorry," Sarah whispered. "I'm angry and hurt," her mother admitted. "But you're still my daughter. Knowing you're alive, that's everything." They began monthly calls, brief but steady, rebuilding a fragile connection. David encouraged it. "Family's complicated," he told her, "but irreplaceable." That Christmas, a card arrived from James, wishing you peace. "Your secret is safe." A photo showed him retired in Florida. Some cases are meant to stay unsolved. Sarah and David understood. He'd buried the case forever. That night, surrounded by her family, Sarah finally felt the ordinary peace she'd fought for. When the children slept, David told her softly, "I don't see Jennifer or Sarah anymore. I just see my wife. Our story isn't perfect, but it's ours." Tears filled her eyes. "Really? Really?" By early 2024, Sarah had found hard-earned peace. She spoke carefully with her parents each month, shared glimpses of her children's lives, and watched them thrive. Lily driven by justice, Tyler expressing himself through music, Sophie uniting them all. With David, she rebuilt trust through honesty and patience. Still, fear sometimes crept in. Sirens, patrol cars, the ghosts of Sarah Mitchell. But she knew she'd made the right choice. Looking at her children's happiness proved the sacrifice worthwhile. One March evening, Tyler hugged her from behind. "Mom, I'm glad we came here. I feel safe." Sarah held him close, eyes wet. "Me too, sweetheart." That one sentence, "I feel safe," made every risk worth it. Jennifer Hayes continued her quiet life in Laurel Springs. Sarah Mitchell remained a name in a cold Vermont file. Both identities were real, and Sarah had learned to live with that truth. As spring came and the dogwoods bloomed, she stood with David watching their children play. "No regrets?" he asked. "Regrets for the pain, yes," she said, "but not for saving them." Somewhere in Florida, James enjoyed his retirement. Somewhere in Vermont, Sarah Mitchell's case gathered dust. And in North Carolina, Jennifer Hayes lived freely, imperfect, but whole. She had run to save her children, and in doing so, had saved herself. The cost was high, the consequences lasting, but the result was exactly what she'd hoped for that desperate December night. Her children were safe, her family intact, and though peace wasn't perfect, it was real. Sometimes that was enough.